On a summer morning in northern Georgia, a mother stood on the porch watching her daughter disappear down the gravel path with their golden retriever trotting ahead, leash trailing loosely in her hand. It was supposed to be a quick walk before breakfast. She had no way of knowing it would be the last time she'd see either of them. Police searched the nearby woods. Volunteers combed the hiking trails and drainage ditches. Flyers were stapled to every telephone pole within 5 counties. But nothing turned up. Not a shoe. Not a hair. Not even the dog's collar. And as the weeks passed, the case faded from headlines, then from dinner table conversations. A year passed. The leads dried up. Hope unraveled. Then, exactly 12 months later, a hunter tracking deer migration with a drone equipped for thermal imaging made a discovery that would shatter everything they thought they knew about the case and reveal a truth darker than anyone had dared to imagine. The doorbell's sharp chime pierced the early morning quiet like a scalpel. Caroline Mercer tightened the belt of her robe and walked toward the front door, her bare feet cold against the kitchen tile. Through the peephole she saw Detective Alan Rush standing on her porch. His breath hung in the crisp Georgia air like fog. Her stomach dropped. In the year since Harper had vanished, every unexpected knock, every unknown number had carried the same weight, the fear that this was the moment the search would end. "Detective Rush," she said, her voice catching as she opened the door. "Have you found—" "Mrs. Mercer," he said gently. "May I come in? I have news about your daughter's case." She stepped aside in silence, leading him into the living room where Harper's junior year photo still sat on the mantel. The detective lowered himself into the armchair, his face unreadable. "Early this morning we got a call from a hunter named Brent Daly," Rush said, pulling out a tablet. "He was using a thermal drone to monitor deer near the Elkmont Wildlife Reserve. The drone picked up something unusual." Caroline's hands knotted in her lap. What kind of unusual? At first Mr. Daly assumed it was a stray coyote. The heat signature showed a medium-sized animal tied to a tree deep in the reserve. But when he maneuvered the drone in closer— Detective Rush turned the tablet toward her. Grainy thermal footage played. The shape was unmistakable, curled on the ground, shivering. A dog. Golden retriever. Medium build. Still breathing. Caroline's voice cracked. "It's Buddy." "We believe so," the detective said. "He's alive, Mrs. Mercer. After a year, somehow he survived." She blinked, stunned. "Where's Harper? Is she—" "We're mobilizing every available unit," he said. "And the dog is safe. He's at the Northeast Georgia Emergency Veterinary Clinic on Highway 78. He's alive, Mrs. Mercer, and based on what the rescue team reported, he's been cared for." Caroline was already rising from the couch, mind reeling. "Cared for? What do you mean, cared for?" Detective Rush met her eyes. "I think it's best if you see for yourself. I can drive you there now if you'd like." And 20 minutes later, they pulled into the parking lot of the Northeast Georgia Emergency Veterinary Clinic. Caroline barely waited for the detective to stop the car before she pushed the door open and sprinted toward the glass entryway. Her heart thundered in her chest. The receptionist saw the look on her face and said nothing, just pointed toward a hallway and led them quickly to an examination room in the back. Dr. Sarah Chen, mid-40s, calm but visibly concerned, stood beside a golden retriever lying on a padded metal table. Even from behind, even after a full year, Caroline knew. It was Buddy. His coat was patchy, tangled in places. He was visibly thinner, but it was him. "Mrs. Mercer," Dr. Chen said gently, stepping aside. "He's sedated right now, just enough to keep him calm while we assess him, but he's going to be okay." Caroline's hands trembled as she reached out and touched Buddy's side. His fur was warm. He was breathing, alive. "How?" she managed to whisper. Dr. Chen's expression turned puzzled, as though she was still trying to make sense of it herself. "That's actually what's remarkable about this. Despite the trauma and the conditions, Buddy shows clear signs of sustained care. We pumped his stomach. There's food in there, looks like dry kibble, probably consumed within the last 12 hours. She glanced at the detective, then back at Caroline. "He's underweight, sure, but his body condition is stable. Someone's been feeding him regularly." Detective Rush's voice was low. Someone was keeping him alive. Caroline's fingers moved gently across Buddy's neck and paused. Rope burns. Fresh. Raw. These marks, she said, from being tied to that tree. Yes. Dr. Chen nodded, then pointed. But look here, this collar. Is this the one he had when he disappeared? Caroline's eyes fell to the blue nylon collar. Plain. Tagless. Unfamiliar. Number? He had a red leather collar. With his name tag, our address, my number. This isn't his. Someone replaced it, Rush said, scribbling into his notepad. Someone didn't want him identified, at least not too soon. Caroline blinked. But why? If someone took Harper, why care for her dog? Why feed him for a year, then tie him up like that? Rush's jaw clenched. That's what we're going to find out. Search teams are already in the woods. If Harper's out there any trace, we'll find it. Dr. Chen stroked Buddy's head gently. He's been through hell, but he's tough. I'd like to keep him under observation for 24 hours. Run tests. But physically? He'll recover. Caroline nodded, silent, unable to look away from the dog who had slept at her daughter's feet every night. Buddy had been Harper's 16th birthday gift just 2 years ago. Since then, they had been inseparable, taking their morning walks every Saturday without fail, until that Saturday morning last July, when neither of them came home. Mrs. Mercer, Detective Rush said softly, this is the strongest lead we've had. Someone kept this dog alive for a reason. That someone knows what happened to Harper. As Caroline stood in the bright, sterile examination room, watching Buddy's chest rise and fall with each sedated breath, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in months hope. Terrible, fragile hope. The kind that whispered that maybe, just maybe, someone had kept her daughter as alive as they'd kept her dog. The phone rang, just as she was stepping through the front door of her house. Caroline had spent the last hour sitting beside Buddy, gently running her hand over his fur, trying to make sense of the morning's revelations. Principal Megan Holloway's name appeared on the caller ID. Caroline, I just got off the phone with the sheriff's department, Principal Holloway said, breathless with urgency. About Buddy, about Harper's dog being found. The entire East Ridge High School community wants to help. We're organizing volunteer search parties to sweep the forest near where he was discovered. We're hoping to find any trace of Harper. Janet, Carolyn's voice faltered. Thank you. Several teachers are already on their way to your house to coordinate. We're not wasting a moment. Harper is one of our sand. We're going to bring her home. Within 30 minutes, Caroline's quiet suburban home had transformed into a full-blown command center. Cars lined the street. Teachers, school staff, and parent volunteers arrived in waves, carrying maps, first aid kits, and walkie-talkies. Her kitchen table was covered with topographical maps of the Coeur d'Alene forest. Someone had set up a coffee station on the counter. Coach Jim Rodriguez, the school's head football coach and now unofficial search coordinator, stood at the head of the table with a laser pointer in hand. All right, everyone, listen up, he called out. We're going to divide into teams of 6. Each group will be assigned a grid section that radiates outward from where Buddy was located. He pointed to a red X on one of the maps. That's roughly 15 miles northeast of town near Bunko Ridge. The terrain is steep and uneven. Be careful out there. Among the volunteers, Caroline noticed Mr. Tobias Chandler Harper's AP biology teacher. He stood a few steps apart, studying the maps with intense focus. Unlike most of the others, who'd shown up in sweatshirts and sneakers, Mr. Blankenway and wanted. Chandler wore brand-new technical gear, a moisture-wicking shirt, convertible hiking pants, and high-end trail boots. Mrs. Mercer, he said, walking over with a gentle expression. I want you to know how deeply this has affected all of us at the school. Whatever it takes, we're going to find her. Harper is such a special student, Mr. Chandler said softly. Thank you, Mr. Chandler, Caroline replied. She always enjoyed your class. His eyes brightened with something that might have been pride. She's remarkably dedicated to her AP biology studies. I remember her staying after class just last year, asking about the prerequisites for pre-med programs. Caroline blinked, surprised by the specific memory. She talked to you about pre-med? Oh, yes, quite frequently, he said, nodding. She was especially focused on getting into the University of Montana's program, said it was her dream school, but she worried her grades might not be competitive enough. He paused, his expression turning more intent. I assured her that with her work ethic and natural intelligence, she had nothing to worry about. She did mention feeling pressure to succeed, especially after your family's recent changes. The reference to the divorce made Caroline stiffen slightly. She didn't recall Harper being that open with her teachers about personal matters. "I'd like to volunteer to lead Search Team C," Mr. Chandler said suddenly, turning to the group. He pulled a handheld GPS unit from his backpack. "I'll take the Eastern Quadrant. I've been studying search and rescue protocols overnight. I also brought emergency supplies flares, emergency blankets, water purification tablets." Coach Rodriguez raised his eyebrows, clearly impressed. "That's some serious preparation, Tobias. We appreciate the initiative." Mr. Chandler laid out a large, detailed topographical map he had apparently printed himself. Elevations and trail markers had been meticulously highlighted in the eastern section. "This area has several ravines, dense brush, and unmaintained game trails," he explained. "It'll require someone with hiking experience to navigate it safely." "Where would you like me?" Caroline asked, stepping up to the table. Mr. Chandler looked up quickly. "Oh, I think you should join Team A heading north, Mrs. Mercer. That terrain is far more manageable, mostly established logging trails. The eastern route, well, it's quite treacherous. Steep inclines, loose rock. We wouldn't want you getting injured when Harper needs you to be strong." And something about the way he so gently steered her away from his search area gave Caroline pause, but Coach Rodriguez was already nodding in agreement. "He's right," Rodriguez said. "Team A will cover the northern section. It's easier terrain, less chance of injury." As the teams began forming and preparing to depart, Caroline watched Mr. Chandler organize his group with surprising efficiency. He handed out laminated maps, distributed water bottles and radios, and led what sounded very much like a practiced safety briefing. For a high school science teacher, he seemed unusually prepared, as if he'd been planning for this exact scenario. "We'll find her, Mrs. Mercer," Mr. Chandler said, brushing past her on his way out. His hand briefly touched her shoulder, firm but gentle. "I promise you, we'll search every inch." "Every inch of that forest," Tobias Chandler said quietly. "Harper deserves to come home." Before the search teams departed, there was a lull as volunteers gathered their gear and finalized transportation arrangements. Caroline found herself back at the kitchen table with Mr. Chandler and a few other teachers, reviewing the search grid one more time. The science teacher had pulled his chair a little closer to hers, pointing out various landmarks on his detailed topographical map. "You know, Mrs. Mercer," Mr. Chandler began, his voice lowering into a more confidential tone, "I've been thinking about all my conversations with Harper over the past year. There might be places she mentioned that could help narrow our search." "What kind of conversations?" Caroline asked, clinging to any thread that might lead to her daughter. Any fragment mattered now. "Well," Chandler said, "she often talked about her college goals during our tutoring sessions. She was extremely anxious about getting into a strong pre-med program." He leaned back slightly, gaze thoughtful. "She told me she was afraid of letting you down, especially after your husband left 3 years ago. Harper felt like she needed to be perfect to make up for all the upheaval." Caroline's breath caught in her chest. The divorce had been finalized 3 years ago. Yes, but Harper had always seemed so composed. She'd never shared that kind of vulnerability with her directly. "She told you that?" "Oh, yes," he replied, nodding. "We spoke at length. Her perfectionism weighed heavily on her. She'd say things like, 'Mom's been through so much I can't let her down,' and 'What if I'm not smart enough for medical school?'" He shook his head slightly. "She put a lot of pressure on herself." Mrs. Patterson, the English teacher seated nearby, shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "I didn't realize Harper was struggling that much," she said. "She always seemed so confident in class." "She opened up during our one-on-one tutoring sessions," Mr. Chandler explained. "That kind of setting can make students more comfortable expressing what they're really feeling." "I'm grateful for those sessions," Caroline said quietly, reaching out to briefly touch his arm. Her grades in biology went from B's to solid A's. Those Monday and Wednesday meetings really helped. Mr. Chandler's expression flickered for a split second before he smiled. Actually, we met on Tuesdays and Thursdays, he corrected. I remember clearly those were my designated tutoring days. Caroline frowned slightly. No, I'm almost certain it was Mondays and Wednesdays. Those were my late shifts at the hospital. I remember leaving dinner in the fridge for her on those nights. Memory can be tricky during stressful times, Mr. Chandler said smoothly. But I'm quite sure it was Tuesdays and Thursdays. In fact, Harper preferred studying in the science prep room instead of the library. It was quieter, more private for focused learning. Coach Rodriguez looked up. Wait, the prep room? Isn't that usually off limits to students? I made an... Mr. Chandler began, but stopped short. Exception for dedicated students like Harper, Mr. Chandler continued, his tone easy, almost nostalgic. She actually helped me organize lab supplies while we reviewed material. Kinesthetic learning, you know, hands-on, it helped her retain information better. He gave a wistful smile, leaning back slightly. She earned quite a bit of extra credit by staying after school to prepare lab experiments. Such a dedicated young woman. Caroline felt something unfamiliar crawl up her spine knees. It was the way he spoke about Harper, the casual familiarity, the detailed knowledge of her thoughts, goals, even insecurities. It felt deeper than what a normal teacher-student relationship would reasonably hold. How often did those prep room sessions happen? She asked, keeping her voice steady. Oh, quite regularly, Chandler replied without hesitation. Sometimes she'd stay until 5 or 6 in the evening, especially before big exams. She was determined to keep her average. He chuckled softly. I told her, with her natural intelligence and my guidance, she could do anything she set her mind to. There was something in his eyes when he said it, something that made Caroline's skin prickle. Suddenly, Mr. Chandler's phone vibrated on the table. The screen lit up. Before he could snatch it, Caroline caught a glimpse of the message preview. Stick to the plan. His hand moved quickly, too quickly, to flip the phone face down. Probably one of the other teachers checking in about the search, he said, his voice climbing a note higher. Aren't you going to answer it? Mrs. Patterson asked from across the table. Could be important. No, it's fine, Chandler replied too quickly again. We should stay focused on the map, the search sectors. But Caroline noticed something else now. His hands weren't as steady as before. He kept glancing at the phone like it might come alive. That prickling sensation deepened in her stomach. The personal details. The confused tutoring schedule. The prep room that was off limits. Now, a cryptic message. Any one of those things could have been innocent. But together, they started forming a shape she couldn't ignore. Mr. Chandler, Caroline said slowly, carefully. Did Harper ever mention any favorite hiking spots? Any specific trails in the forest she liked? He paused just a second too long before answering. No, he said finally. She wasn't much of an outdoors person. Preferred books to hiking boots. That's why this whole thing is so confusing. It's not like her to just wander off trail. But that wasn't true. Caroline's heart sank. Harper had loved hiking. She'd even joined the trail running club her sophomore year. Either Mr. Chandler didn't know her daughter as well as he claimed, or he was lying. Neither option made Caroline feel any better. Out in the driveway, the commotion swelled again. Search teams were loading gear into cars, preparing to head into the forest. Caroline stood slowly, eyes still on Mr. Chandler, her instincts no longer just unsettled now, they were screaming. Through the living room window, Marissa could see Mr. and Steven's tight ass. Chandler directing his team with practiced efficiency, distributing walkie-talkies, checking backpacks, and giving brisk nods to volunteers. But even as he moved with such apparent purpose, something about their earlier conversation gnawed at her. The inconsistencies about the tutoring schedule. The strangely intimate way he had spoken about Adrian's thoughts and fears. It had felt off, too personal, too rehearsed. Unable to shake her growing sense of unease, Marissa quietly stepped away from the bustle in the driveway. She slipped upstairs, her footsteps soft against the hardwood, and entered Adrian's room, a space she had left nearly untouched since the disappearance. It was a shrine now, a time capsule of who her daughter had been. The purple comforter Adrian had picked out for her 16th birthday still covered the neatly made bed. Her desk sat in perfect order, the laptop closed, a pencil cup full, textbooks stacked with the kind of precision only someone like Adrian would maintain. Marissa crossed to the desk and pulled open the top drawer. Inside was Adrian's academic planner. It was thick, spiral-bound, with monthly and weekly layouts filled in her daughter's neat handwriting. Marissa flipped back to September of the previous school year and began scanning for mentions of tutoring. And there it was. Week 2 of September, written in blue ink, Science Help, Mr. C, 330, room 214. But it was a Monday. Marissa frowned. Mr. Chandler had insisted their sessions were always on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She turned the pages. 2 weeks later, another Monday. Then a Wednesday noted, canceled. Mr. C has meeting. Rescheduled to Friday. The pattern emerging was scattered and irregular, nothing like the structured schedule he had described downstairs. Most of the changes were at his request. Digging deeper, Marissa found Adrian's old report cards tucked into the planner's back pocket. Her biology grade had been a B in September. By October, when these sessions increased in frequency, it had jumped to an A. By November, she had perfect scores. Returning to the October pages, Marissa noticed something she hadn't before. In the margins, written in Adrian's favorite purple pen, were little notes. October Kimpsting. Mr. C says I'm special. Different from other students. The 22nd of October. Earned my A today. Mr. C so proud. The language sent a chill through her. Earned? Her A? What did that mean? Moving into November, things became even more troubling. Several lunch periods were labeled Science Prep Room, organizing supplies, with time slots that didn't match school scheduling. One entry read, 12 o'clock, 12:45. But Lakeland High's lunch break was only 30 minutes. Another showed, 12 o'clock, 12:50. Late to English, but Mr. C wrote note. Marissa's breath caught. These were not ordinary tutoring sessions. Marissa's hands were trembling as she reached the 18th of November in Adrian's planner. There, written in her daughter's careful script, was an entry that made her blood run cold. Mr. C gave me the pink bracelet for being his best student today. So pretty. He said not to show Mom because other kids would be jealous and might say mean things. Our special secret. A pink bracelet. Marissa had never seen any pink bracelet. She frantically flipped through more pages, scanning for anything that might explain or even contradict what she had just read. But instead, she found more references scattered mentions of gifts and privileges that felt increasingly inappropriate. The 3rd of December. Mr. C, let me use his personal laptop for research during lunch. He trusts me so much. The 10th of December. Found our secret study spot today. Mr. C says it's just for his special students. Had to promise not to tell anyone, not even Jess. Jess, Adrian's best friend. They told each other everythinger, at least Marissa had thought they did. Now she wasn't sure of anything. Her heart pounded as she turned to the 15th of December entry. This one took up the entire notes section, written in Adrian's usual purple ink, the one she always reserved for personal thoughts. Mr. C explained why our tutoring is different from what other kids get. He says, I have potential that needs special nurturing, away from the mediocre masses. His words. The secret study spot is perfect, no interruptions, no jealous kids watching. He says by senior year I'll be so far ahead of everyone else that getting into UW will be easy. Mom will be so proud. Just have to keep our methods private, Mr. C says people wouldn't understand how special our connection is. Marissa felt her legs give out. She collapsed onto Adrian's bed, the planner clenched in her hands. Her vision blurred with tears. But she kept reading, flipping back and forth between pages, notes, and scribbles that now held sinister weight. The language, the secrecy, the praise, the hidden meetings, the gifts. It all pointed to something far more disturbing than a devoted teacher. It painted a picture of manipulation of grooming. How had she missed this? How had the school? Outside, through Adrian's window, Marissa could hear the search teams preparing to leave. Car doors slammed shut. Engines rumbled to life. Mr. Chandler's voice floated up from the driveway, confident, commanding, directing volunteers as they loaded into vehicles. The same voice that had whispered to Adrian about being different, about being chosen, about secrets. Should she call Detective Holbrook? But what if she was wrong? What if she was just a grief-stricken mother grasping at shadows? Number. She wasn't wrong. She could feel it. Mr. Chandler's team was heading to the eastern quadrant, the one he'd steered her away from. Marissa tucked the planner into her jacket and hurried downstairs. She knew what she had to do. Confirming radio frequencies, Marissa spotted her assigned Team A gathering near Coach Rodriguez's SUV. But her eyes were fixed on Mr. Chandler as he walked briskly toward his silver Honda Accord. "Mrs. Ewing, we're about ready to head out," called Mrs. Patterson from Team A. "I'll be right there," Marissa replied, forcing a smile. She turned toward her own car. "Just need to grab something from my vehicle." She climbed into her Toyota Camry and started the engine, her hands trembling slightly on the wheel. Through the rearview mirror, she watched Mr. Chandler's Honda pull out of her driveway. According to the plan, Team C was supposed to head northeast toward Bunko Road, near where Buddy had been found. But as Marissa eased onto the street, careful not to attract attention, she saw Chandler turn south onto Highway 95, the complete opposite direction. Her grip on the wheel tightened. Where was he going? She followed at a cautious distance, maintaining 2 or 3 cars between them when traffic allowed. Sunday afternoon traffic was sparse, making her job easier but also riskier. After about 3 miles, Chandler suddenly pulled into a gas station. Marissa's heart raced as she drove past, pretending not to notice. In her side mirror, she saw him step out of the car, scan the lot slowly, his posture stiff and alert. She pulled into a nearby McDonald's parking lot a quarter-mile down the road and parked, turning off her headlights. She watched. 5 minutes later, the silver Honda reappeared, pulling back onto Highway 95 and continuing south. Marissa let a few more cars pass before easing onto the road behind him again, keeping further back this time. 2 more miles down the highway, Chandler made another unexpected turn, this time into an abandoned roadside fruit stand. He didn't exit the vehicle, he just sat there. Marissa pulled off onto a dirt turnout obscured by a cluster of pine trees. From her glove box, she retrieved a pair of binoculars Adrian had used during a brief phase of birdwatching last spring. Through the lenses, she saw him scanning his surroundings, again checking his mirrors, looking left, then right. He was searching for something. Someone. Maybe even her. After a minute, he pulled back onto the road. Marissa followed. The Honda turned west onto Rimrock Road, a winding 2-lane that led toward the older residential zones on the outskirts of town. This was familiar ground home to early settler houses, many built in the early 1900s, hidden among modern ranch-style homes and trailer lots. Traffic was lighter here. She had to hang further back, knowing she'd be more visible now. The curves in the road sometimes let the Honda vanish momentarily before reappearing again. After about 4 more miles, she saw his turn signal flash. He pulled into a gravel driveway flanked by tall cedar trees. Marissa didn't slow. She continued past, barely glancing as she took in the glimpse of an old white house, its shutters broken, its porch sagging with age. And something told her. Adrian had been there. The Craftsman house sat back from the road, partially hidden by a thicket of overgrown rhododendrons. Marissa continued for another quarter-mile before finding a turnout where she could safely pull over. She parked on the gravel shoulder behind a dense stand of Douglas firs and killed the engine. Her phone still had a decent signal out here. With trembling fingers, she typed the address she'd glimpsed on the weathered mailbox, 4847 Rimrock Road. The county assessor's website loaded slowly. After a few tense moments, the property information appeared. Owner estate of Ella Lennar Chandler. Date of death November 2019. Beneficiary Tobias Chandler. Her heart began to pound. She refined her search and found Ella Lennar Chandler's obituary. A retired schoolteacher. preceded in death by her husband William, survived by one grandson, Tobias. The property had been in the Chandler family since 1947. A Zillow search turned up even more disturbing information. The house had been listed as a rental in March 2020, just months after Ella Lenar's death. The listing described it as a charming three-bedroom craftsman on 2 private acres, ideal for someone seeking rural tranquility. But then the status had changed. Temporarily off-market as of the 15th of June. 2023. Marissa's stomach twisted. Adrian had vanished on the 8th of July, 2023, less than a month after Mr. Chandler had taken the house off the market. She stepped out of her car and moved quietly into the tree line, creeping closer to the house while staying hidden. From her concealed vantage point behind a cluster of huckleberry bushes, she had a clearer view of the property. The house looked well-maintained, fresh paint, neatly trimmed hedges, the lawn recently mowed. But something was off. A small pile of newspapers had accumulated on the front porch, 5, maybe 6, suggesting someone came by to maintain appearances, but didn't live here full-time. Fresh tire tracks crunched in the gravel driveway. One set matched the Honda Accord, now parked beside a detached garage Mr. Chandler's car. But another set, slightly older, led toward the back of the property. The house appeared quiet. No lights were on despite the cloudy afternoon, no visible movement behind the windows. Yet Mr. Chandler had entered with a key, his posture casual, like someone used to being here, confident, unhurried. Marissa's mind raced. He was supposed to be leading a search team through the Eastern Quadrant directing volunteers in the forest near Bunko Road. Instead, he was here, alone, at a house he'd quietly taken off the market just before her daughter disappeared. Her phone buzzed softly in her palm. Detective Holbrook's number stared back from the screen. Her thumb hovered over the call button. What would she even say? That she'd followed her daughter's teacher through back roads? That she was hiding in the woods outside his dead grandmother's house based on a gut feeling and entries in a high school planner? But something was wrong. She felt it in her bones. And Adrian might still be inside. Marissa crouched lower behind the huckleberry bushes, heart pounding, thumb hovering over Detective Holbrook's number on her phone screen. She hesitated. What exactly would she say if she called him now? That she'd followed her daughter's AP biology teacher across town, watching as he turned away from the official search zone and instead drove to a house he legally inherited from his grandmother? That he entered it confidently, alone, when he was supposed to be leading a 6-person search party in the opposite direction? That she'd seen nothing explicitly criminal, only a string of deeply unsettling details and gut-wrenching suspicion? She could already hear the detective's voice in her head, measured and careful. Did you see anything illegal? Do you have evidence of a crime? And what would her answer be? Number? Not yet. Just a man at a house he owned. Some vague, increasingly disturbing diary entries from Adrian's planner. A pink bracelet she'd never seen. A contradiction about tutoring days. A nervous glance. A message that read, "Stick to the plan." And now a locked-down house, quiet and isolated, pulled off the rental market just weeks before her daughter vanished. It wasn't enough. Not yet. But it could be, if she moved carefully. If she didn't spook him. If she was wrong, if all of this was just the spiraling fear of a grieving mother desperate for answers, then she'd not only have wasted the department's time, but she risked casting doubt on the investigation. Worse, she could tip off Chandler and send him running before they knew what he might be hiding. But if she was right, then Adrian might be here, somewhere close, somewhere beneath this craftsman home that suddenly seemed like the darkest place in all of Idaho. Marissa backed away from her hiding place slowly, careful not to snap any twigs beneath her boots. She made her way back to her Camry and drove half a mile further down Rimrock Road, scanning for a new vantage point. That's when she saw it, a long-abandoned red barn, its siding warped roof slumped like a collapsed lung. It sat tucked behind a curtain of tall trees, a forgotten relic of the countryside. She turned down the uneven dirt track behind it and parked. Her hands were trembling now, not from fear exactly, but from the weight of what she might find. She took out her binoculars, Adrian's, from her birdwatching phase sophomore year, and began making her way back toward the Chandler property on foot. The air was damp with pine and old rain, the forest thick with Douglas firs and tangled underbrush. As she approached the back of the house, she spotted the slope that revealed more of the foundation. From here, she could see the basement clearly. Most of the windows were sealed with glass blocks. Thick, opaque, designed to let in light but block out eyes. But thereon, the far left, was one small ventilation window. Narrow, old-fashioned, with something hanging inside. Curtains. Marissa crouched, breath shallow. Fresh concrete had been poured around sections of the foundation. Recently, too recently, her fingers gripped the edges of the huckleberry branches as she inched forward. When she finally reached the small window, she had to kneel in the damp earth. Her knees pressed into mud. She leaned close, cupped her hands to the glass, and peered through the slight gap between the curtains. It was a classroom. A whiteboard on the back wall, textbooks on a desk, and hanging from the chair the thing that stole the air from her lungs, Adrian's purple backpack. The one with the silver zipper she'd sewn on herself. Marissa's world narrowed to that tiny window and the unbearable confirmation her daughter had been here. And maybe, just maybe, still was. The small rip on the front pocket patched months ago with a smiley face iron-on was unmistakable. It was Adrian's backpack, the same one she'd slung over her shoulder that final morning when she left with Buddy. She'd mentioned planning to stop at the library afterward, maybe pick up a few books for a biology project. That backpack should have come home with her. It never did. And now, here it was, hanging casually on the back of a desk chair in what looked like a hidden room beneath Tobias Chandler's inherited house. Marissa's vision blurred with tears, but she forced herself to focus. She needed to document every detail, memorize every inch of what she was seeing. The textbooks were clearly from Lakeland High. She recognized the AP biology text, same edition Adrian used. The whiteboard on the wall was covered in dense notes diagrams of mitochondria, outlines of cellular respiration, chemical pathways. The handwriting was Mr. Chandler's branching NETCADZA. That precise looping script was the same she'd seen on Adrian's returned assignments for 2 years straight. The room didn't look like a makeshift hideout. It looked lived in, personal. There was a small fridge tucked into a corner with a microwave perched on top. A narrow cot sat against the stone wall, made up with a lavender blanket and a pillow. The stone walls, dark and damp-looking, suggested this space had once been a root cellar part of the house's original foundation. Now it was something else entirely. She caught sight of a narrow pipe PVC running along the ceiling toward what looked like a door, a makeshift bathroom maybe. Someone had designed this place to function as more than just a hideout. This was a residence, a prison. Movement pulled her attention. Marissa ducked lower behind the huckleberry bush as Tobias Chandler came into view, descending what must have been a stairwell just out of her line of sight. He carried a tray 2 sandwiches, a glass of milk, and apple slices arranged neatly, just the way Adrian had always liked them as a child. He walked toward the back of the room, out of view, and she heard his voice, muffled but audible through the vent. "I brought lunch, turkey, and Swisher favorite." Quote. Then another voice, a girl's voice, quiet, resigned. "You still haven't told her," Chandler said, his voice low and coaxing. "But we have to be careful now since they found the dog." There was more from the girl longer this time, but Marissa couldn't make out all the words. "I know you miss him," Chandler said, "but we couldn't have him leading them here too soon. Everything I do is to protect you, to protect what we're building." Then she heard Adrian's voice clearer now. "Mom won't. She'll understand eventually," he interrupted. "When you graduate with perfect scores, when you get into med school, she'll see I was right." Marissa's hand flew to her mouth. Her daughter was alive. Alive but trapped in someone else's fantasy of perfection. The ventilation gap narrow and invisible from the road had just revealed everything. She had to call for help. Now, this wasn't a theory or suspicion. This was evidence. Real, terrifying evidence. Her daughter was alive. Marissa's hand shook violently as she pulled out her phone, still crouched beneath the basement window. Backing away slowly, she tried to put distance between herself and the house while keeping sight of the back door. The HVAC unit, humming softly near the corner of the foundation, gave her just enough cover. She pressed herself against its cold metal surface and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's calm voice felt surreal against the deafening thrum of Marissa's pulse. "This is Marissa Ewing," she whispered, her breath hitching. "My daughter Adrianeshi's been missing for a year. I'm at 4847 Rimrock Road, and I can see her. She's alive. She's being held in the basement. Her teacher Tobias Chandler, he has her." "Ma'am, I need you to speak up," the dispatcher later identified as Bethany Cole said. "Did you say you can see your missing daughter?" "Yes," Marissa hissed. "In the basement. I saw her backpack. I heard them talking. She's there. Please, it's 4847 Rimrock." She shifted her weight to better pronounce the street name and, her heel came down on something brittle. A sickening crack pierced the quiet air. She looked down in horror. A decorative solar light, now shattered, its plastic housing broken and bits of glass littering the ground. The back door slammed open with a bang. It struck the siding hard enough to bounce. Tobias Chandler stepped into the doorway, his face contorted in rage. The calm, scholarly mask he always wore was gone. "I know you're there," he shouted, eyes darting across the yard. "Marissa, you followed me? You couldn't just trust me to help search for her, could you?" "Marissa, run." She bolted toward the tree line, her phone still pressed to her ear. "Rimrock Road, 4847, send help now," she cried, as Bethany's voice crackled urgently. A root caught her foot. She went down hard. Her phone flew from her hand and landed several feet away. Scrambling, she tried to reach for it, but Chandler got there first. With a furious snarl, he grabbed the device and hurled it against the brick siding. It exploded into pieces. "You don't understand," he roared. "You never understood what Adrian really needs. The pressure you put on her, your mediocre school, your empty ambitions. I'm protecting her." Marissa, run. Branches whipped her face. Brambles tore at her arms. Behind her, Chandler crashed through the brush, his new hiking boots slamming into the forest floor. She had to get to her car. "You buried her in busy work and standardized tests," his voice shouted behind her. "She deserves more real knowledge. I gave her what you never could. Individual attention, real education, a chance to reach her full potential." The abandoned barn came into view, and Marissa pushed her legs harder, burning with effort. She could see her Camry just 50 feet away. 40, 30. She yanked the driver's door open, dove inside, and slammed the lock shut just as Mr. Chandler reached the vehicle. His fist struck the window, furious. "She wants to be there," he shouted. "She's thriving. You'll destroy everything we've built." Marissa started the engine with trembling hands and threw it into reverse, gravel spraying as she backed away. In her rearview mirror, she saw him sprinting toward his Honda. Her heart pounded. She spun the wheel, tires screeching as she tore back toward the main road. Her thoughts raced as fast as the car. The dispatcher had gotten the address. She'd said it twice. Spelled out Rimrock. That had to be enough. They had to be on their way. She veered onto Rimrock Road, taking the curves too fast. Behind her, in the mirror, she spotted the silver Honda. He was following, driving with the same terrifying, unhinged focus he'd shown when he chased her through the woods. At the intersection with Cedar Lane, she turned sharply right, tires screaming. He followed. A residential neighborhood opened ahead, and she weaved through it, running stop signs, praying no children were playing nearby. Left on Maple, right on 3rd. Another left onto Pine. But he knew the roads, too. He stayed with her through every turn. Highway 95 came into view, and she merged without even checking, horns blaring as cars swerved around her. The Honda followed, cutting off a pickup truck to stay close. But the heavier traffic worked in her favor. She darted between cars while he got caught behind a slow-moving RV. By the time she reached the Walmart intersection, she'd lost him. She pulled into the lot, heart slamming, and drove to the far corner, tucking her car between two large trucks. Hidden from view. Her whole body trembled. Her stomach rolled with adrenaline. She had no phone, no idea if help was even coming. All she could do was wait. Pray that Bethany Cole had heard enough. 20 minutes later, Officer James Wright of the Coutini County Sheriff's Department spotted the silver Honda returning to 4847 Rimrock Road. 2 other units were already there, having arrived minutes earlier to find the property empty and preparing to force entry when the car appeared. Mr. Chandler saw the cruisers too late. He tried to reverse, but Officer Wright blocked him in. Within seconds, officers had him out of the car, on the ground, and in handcuffs. His calm, intellectual mask cracked completely. "You don't understand," he screamed as they read him his rights. "She needs MEVR education, her future. I'm the only one who truly sees her potential." But no one was listening anymore. Understands her potential. The officers ignored his ravings as they began their search of the property. The main floor revealed nothing out of the ordinary, just a well-kept craftsman home. But in the basement, Deputy Sarah Martinez noticed something odd about the water heater closet. The unit was pushed forward in a way that seemed unnatural. "Got a door here," she called out. It had been cleverly concealed painted to match the walls, with a locking mechanism that blended into the molding. Mr. Chandler's keys opened it, revealing a narrow passageway. At the end stood a steel door secured with a deadbolt from the outside. Officer Wright approached cautiously. He knocked, then called out, "Adrienne, this is the police. We're here to help you." The room beyond was exactly as Marissa had described, part classroom, part prison. A converted root cellar with cinder-block walls and low ceilings. At the desk, under the sterile glow of a fluorescent light, sat Adrienne Ewing. Her back was straight, a pencil in her hand. She looked up, her eyes vacant, the pale skin beneath them hollowed by a year without sunlight. She wasn't emaciated, but she was thin, fragile. Her clothes were clean but hung loosely on her body. In her hands she gripped a notebook filled with line after line of immaculate handwriting. "I need to finish this assignment," she said, her voice raw and strained from disuse. "Mr. C says I can't get into college if I don't keep my perfect GPA. I have a test tomorrow on cellular mitosis." "Adrienne, honey, you're safe now," Officer Wright said, stepping slowly into the room. "Your mom sent us. You're going home." "Home?" Her voice trembled with confusion. "But I have homework 3 chapters to read, 2 lab reports to write. Mr. C says if I fall behind, I'll never catch up. The other students, they're already ahead." Deputy Martinez blinked back tears. Adrienne clutched her notebook like a lifeline. On the pages the officers saw months of assignments, notes, practice tests, diagrams. The desperate effort of a child who believed she could earn her way out of captivity through perfect performance. "We'll make sure your work is safe," Officer Wright said gently, easing the notebook from her hands. "But right now, your mom needs you. She's been waiting so long." Upstairs, the sunlight felt blinding. At Sinai Health Hospital, Adrienne sat quietly on the exam table dwarfed by a hospital gown. Nurses drew blood, checked her vitals, murmured gently. But Adrienne asked only about her textbooks, about her assignments, whether someone could find her calculus notes, whether she could have just one pencil. 3 floors down, in a sterile conference room, Detective Marcus Holbrook stared across the table at Tobias Chandler. The teacher's facade had finally shattered. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes wild, his hands cuffed. And for once he had no more lessons to teach. Carefully styled hair now hanging limp across his forehead. "I want to explain," Chandler said, his voice taking on an almost pleading quality. "People won't understand, but I need someone to know the truth." Detective Holbrook activated his recorder. "Go ahead, Mr. Chandler. Tell me everything." "I noticed Adrienne the first day she walked into my freshman biology class, 3 years ago," Chandler began, his eyes distant with memory. "She wasn't like the other students. She had this hunger for approval, for perfection. Most kids her age are lazy, distracted. But Adrienne? She hung on every word, took meticulous notes, always stayed after class with questions." "When did your relationship become inappropriate?" Holbrook asked, keeping his voice neutral, despite the revulsion he felt. I prefer to think of it as when I recognized her true potential, Chandler replied. Her parents had just divorced. She was struggling with feelings of abandonment, of not being good enough. Her grades were slipping, B's in most subjects. She came to me one day, nearly in tears, worried about her GPA. He leaned forward, as if the detective might somehow understand. I saw an opportunity to help her. I told her about weighted grade show. With special attention and additional assignments, I could ensure she got the A she needed. She was so grateful, so eager to prove herself worthy of that extra help. You used her grades as leverage, Holbrook stated flatly. I provided incentive, Chandler insisted. The lunch period session started innocently enough. She'd come to the science prep room, and we'd review material. But she was so responsive to praise, so disparity for validation. When I told her she was special different from the others, she bloomed like a flower in sunlight. The detective's jaw tightened. When did you first assault her? Chandler's face darkened. It wasn't assault. It was connection. During our anatomy unit, I was explaining muscle groups, and I placed my hand on her shoulder to demonstrate. She didn't pull away. If anything, she leaned into the touch. After that, the boundaries became more fluid. A hand on her back while reviewing her notes. Sitting closer than necessary. Embracing her when she achieved perfect scores. And the kidnapping? That was never the plan, Chandler said, agitation creeping into his voice. But in late June, during one of our sessions, Adrian mentioned her mother was considering a job in Spokane. They'd move before her senior year. I couldn't let that happen. She was so close to perfection, to achieving everything we'd worked for. A move would destroy her progress. Expose her to inferior teachers who wouldn't understand her. He described his preparations with disturbing pride, 3 months of work on his grandmother's root cellar. Soundproofing the walls. Installing. A ventilation system that would keep air flowing without allowing sound to escape. A chemical toilet, discreet enough to avoid suspicion when purchased. A mini fridge and microwave for basic needs. Educational materials to continue her studies. I told the neighbors I was renovating, Chandler continued, his voice eerily calm, to rent the basement as a studio apartment. They never questioned it. Why would they? I was a respected teacher, improving a family property. The day she disappeared? Holbrook prompted. I knew her routine. Saturday morning walks with the dog on the Centennial Trail. Always the same route, same time. I intercepted her near the bridge where the trail is isolated. The chloroform was from old chemistry supplies. The school was supposed to have destroyed years ago. She didn't suffer. When she woke up, she was safe in her new classroom. And the dog? A necessary misdirection. I'd scouted that location in the forest weeks before, remote enough that he wouldn't be found immediately. But eventually, someone would discover him. It would focus the search far from the house. I went back periodically to feed him, keep him alive. A dead dog would end the search. A living dog would extend it, keep hope alive, while directing resources away from the truth. 2 floors up, forensic interviewer Dr. Patricia Vance sat with Adrian in a quiet room, designed to feel less clinical than the rest of the hospital. Marissa watched through one-way glass, tears streaming down her face, as she listened to her daughter's flat, emotionless recitation. Mr. C explained everything that first day, Adrian said, her eyes focused on her hands. He said Mom was relieved I was gone, that now she could date without worrying about setting a bad example. Could save money instead of paying for college. He showed me a news article on his phone about runaways, said that's how I'd been classified. Not missing, just another teenage runaway. How did that make you feel? Dr. Vance asked gently. Hurt at first, but then grateful. Mr. C said he was the only one who truly cared about my education, my future. He risked everything to give me individual attention, to prepare me for college without the distractions and inferior teaching at regular school. She described her daily routine with disturbing normalcy. Wake at 6 a.m., breakfast usually cereal or toast that he'd bring down. Mathematics from 7 to 9. Science until lunch. Afternoon for history and English. Evening for test prep and college essays. He'd grade everything, providing detailed feedback, praise for perfection, disappointment for anything less. He gave me rewards for good performance, Adrian continued. The pink bracelet when I maintained straight A's for a month. New books when I exceeded expectations. Extra food variety for perfect scores. Test scores. Screen time on his laptop for exceptional essays, always supervised, of course. Did you ever try to leave? Dr. Vance asked. Adrian looked genuinely confused by the question. Where would I go? I was a runaway. Mom didn't want me back. I'd missed so much school. I'd never catch up. Mr. C was preparing me for success. Out there, she gestured vaguely. I'd just be another failure. Dr. Helena Morrison, the trauma specialist, later explained to Marissa that Adrian had developed severe Stockholm syndrome. A full year of complete isolation with only her captor for human contact, combined with sustained psychological manipulation, had fundamentally altered her perception of reality. Adrian genuinely believed Tobias Chandler had protected her, that the outside world would never understand her, never welcome her back. When they finally allowed Marissa into the room, Adrian looked at her with eyes that seemed both impossibly young and far too old. Mom? Her voice wavered, uncertain, as if unsure this was real. Oh, baby, Marissa sobbed, pulling her into a trembling embrace. I never stopped looking, not for one day. I love you so much. Adrian remained stiff at first, arms limp at her sides, but slowly like frost beginning to thaw, started to soften. He said you were glad, she whispered, that I was too much trouble, too expensive. Never, Marissa said fiercely, cupping her daughter's face in her hands. You are my whole world. Everything I did was to find you, to bring you home. Detective Holbrook entered quietly, nodding to Dr. Vance before addressing Marissa. We found everything, he said softly. The pink bracelet, the notebooks, the college essays. She wrote about why she was taking a gap year for independent study. The manipulation. It was thorough. Adrian pulled away slightly, anxiety creeping across her expression. My assignments. Did you save them? All that work, I need them for my transcripts. Her voice grew smaller. Am I still going to get into college? Even though I missed a year of real school, Mr. C said the homeschool curriculum was better. But what if colleges don't accept it? What if I ruined everything? Marissa held her tighter, her arms wrapping around the thin frame that had endured so much. Beneath her fingertips were bones far too fragile for a 17-year-old. She understood in that moment that the physical rescue was only the beginning. The girl in her arms didn't yet know she was free. She believed love was earned by perfect grades. That achievement justified existence. That failure meant abandonment. We'll figure it out, Marissa whispered, brushing a lock of tangled hair from Adrian's face. Whatever you need, however long it takes, you're safe now. That's all that matters. But even as she spoke the words, she felt the fear still coiled inside her daughter. Because for Adrian Ewing, safety didn't feel like enough, unless it came with a 4.0 GPA.